2025 might seem like a way off yet, but it is never too early to start talking about the first major flagship release of next year, which is the Galaxy S25 series. And just looking back over 2024, there have been some really exciting phones. We've had the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, the Xiaomi Mix Flip, Honor's Magic V3, and of course, that Huawei Mate X-T. But from all the rumors that we have so far about the Galaxy S25 series, does it show us that Samsung are going to be doing anything exciting when that time rolls around? Well, let's talk about it. As always, we expect to see the release of the S25s around about the start of the year, which is now just customary, and there's no reason that Samsung won't follow suit again, and we expect to see Galaxy unpacked within the first few weeks of January, giving us all that's new with the new S25s. I feel like Samsung have to do something a bit more exciting this year when we see the Galaxy S25s, because everything like the design has been the same for the past couple of years. And while at the moment Samsung sit in a pretty solid position in terms of market share in the US, we've seen a major jump in people picking up Google Pixels over the last couple of months. And if Samsung don't start to innovate and do something a little bit different, then that position in the US could start to flounder. Let's start by having a look at everything design-wise with the Galaxy S25s. We've seen a load of leaked photos of cases, CADs, screen protectors, and of course those renders, and there hasn't been much in design change over the past few years, but now it seems that Samsung have got hold of a former Mercedes-Benz designer to come in and try and redesign their phones and give it a bit of a fresh look. But from the renders, it doesn't look like there's been much of a design change at all this year. So what is different? The biggest change on the Ultra models is that the whole body now seems to be square rather than those round sides that we saw on the S24 Ultras. This keeps it in line with those non-Ultra Galaxy phones and things like the iPhone and of course the Google Pixel 9s. Dummy models of the S25 Ultra seem to confirm these new rounded edges as well, which I'm really happy about because the pointed corners on the S24 Ultra, they were a bit annoying. The camera module seems exactly the same as we used to that we've seen on the Ultra phones for the last few years, and I don't mind that at all. I think it looks really good and it's pretty minimal. And while there's no major design change here, there are some very, very minor tweaks. There's an image comparing mock-ups of the S25 Ultra against the iPhone 16 Pro Max, and this just shows that the camera module is around about 2mm smaller than the iPhones, and it's just over 1mm smaller than the S24 Ultra. There's also a little bit of a bump in one of the cameras here as well, and that is with the ultra wide. So we're going to get a new 50 megapixel sensor on the S25 Ultra, which is quite a nice addition, but there was a rumor that Samsung might be bumping up that 3x telephoto lens as well to 50 megapixels, but that seems to be sticking at 10 megapixels, and Samsung are also just sticking with that same 200 megapixel main and 50 megapixel telephoto camera. There is some talk though that there's going to be a new upgraded JN1 sensor, and then also that 3x telephoto camera could get a new ISOCELL sensor even though it is still staying at 10 megapixels. In terms of what else might be new on the S25 Ultra, that is kind of it. There was a case leak that showed us that the S Pen location is moving from left to right, but besides that, the overall design change is staying pretty much the same. And if you move on to have a look at the S25 and the S25 Plus, then the changes here are even smaller. Overall, there's going to be a slight reduction to the S25 phone itself, but it will still be keeping the same 6.17-inch display that Samsung will probably just market as 6.2 inches, but there is still nothing confirmed on the leaks yet about the S25 Plus. But you can look at these leaked photos of screen protectors for all the S25 models that give you a better idea of what the screen sizes might be. The camera setup also seems to show a new ring around those lenses on the renders of the S25 and S25 Plus, which we should also see on the S25 Ultra. And the only other noticeable difference is that the bezels might be getting a bit smaller on the S25 and S25 Plus, but there is one disappointment here, and it comes to the cameras, because it looks like that the S25's cameras are going to be on par with the S24's. If this is the case, then it's the same sensor that we've seen for basically the last 4 years, and it means that any improvements will not come from hardware, but they will have to come from software. What we're pretty certain on though is colours that will come for all of these models, and the colours that come with the S25 and S25 Plus are Moonlight Blue, Silver Shadow, Sparkling Blue and Sparkling Green, and there also might be a Midnight Black for the Plus. We also have some colours that from the leak said they're going to be made in much lower volume, which could be the online exclusives. So these are Coral Red, Pink Gold and Blue Black. And when it comes to the S25 Ultra, they're all titanium themed again. So we have titanium black, titanium blue, titanium grey, and titanium silver. And for those online exclusives, they could be titanium blue black, titanium jade green, and titanium pink gold. And in terms of how those phones will physically look, that is pretty much everything. But it's what is going to be powering the S25 lineup this year that is interesting and potentially a bit confusing. It seems more than likely that all the S25s will be powered by the new Snapdragon 8 Elite, as reports a couple of months ago before the name change had mentioned the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4. And while it's not certain yet, these chips might also be specialized for Galaxy. But then this is where the rumours start to get a little bit cloudy, because if Samsung don't go all out Qualcomm this year, then in some regions they might decide to go for the Exynos 2500. And these would be for those non-Ultra phones, and this would just be the case outside of the US. And I really hope it's not, because I always feel like living outside of the US, when we get Exynos chips, we feel like we're being a little bit short-changed over having Snapdragon. And apparently Samsung really want to work on their Exynos chip and get it up to scratch. But this is where the confusion part comes in, because other leaks suggest as well that Samsung might end up going with a MediaTek chip for regions outside the US for the S25 and the S25 Plus. But having a MediaTek or Exynos chip, it is plausible because of the high pricing that Qualcomm will charge Samsung. And I would not be against having a Dimensity 9400 chip, because even though we don't have one to test against a Snapdragon 8 Elite yet, this would stack up much closer than an Exynos chip. Samsung were listed as an early adopter of the Snapdragon 8 Elite, so it looks like they will use this across their entire S25 lineup, but we'll just have to wait until unpacked to see what they go with. There are a few things that aren't changing though on this year's S25s, and it looks like that one of the biggest disappointments is going to be the display, because we're going to be seeing the same N13 display as we had last year. This is mostly disappointing because rivals like Apple and Google are using that new Samsung M14 display on their phones. And while the differences aren't huge, the biggest difference is that the M14 materials are 20 to 30% brighter, and they are more efficient, as well as being able to last up to 20% longer over a lifespan. And while I don't think it is the biggest deal breaker when picking up a new phone, you still want to get the latest and greatest when you are buying that phone. And if Samsung make a better display and are giving it to rivals and using the same M13 display in the S25 Ultra that they used in the S24 Ultra, I kind of get why people might be a bit disappointed. While we're talking the same, we're going to be getting the same battery size as well. So 4,000 mAh on the S25 and the same 4,900 mAh on the S25 Plus. And in fact, we're even going to be getting the same 5,000 mAh battery on the S25 Ultra that we had last year. And don't get me wrong, the battery on the S24 Ultra, it was really good. But there are other OEMs now, like Oppo, with their latest Find X8 Pro. It has 5,900 mAh in their phones, and 5,000 mAh is fine. But the biggest takeaway from this is that Samsung, again, is just sticking with what's worked over the last few years. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but other brands are starting to overtake them. A few other things we aren't 100% on are things like RAM. So this could come with 12 gigs of RAM, so it could handle AI tasks just a little easier. And when we look at the S25 Ultra, it seems like this will be getting 16 gigs of RAM, which just seems about right. The storage variants don't expect to change either, so starting at 128 gigs and going up to 512 for the S25 and S25 Plus, and then going up to 1 terabyte for the S25 Ultra. And pricing, of course, we don't know what that is going to be yet, but it doesn't look like Samsung's going to increase the price this year. So that would mean the S25 starting at $799, the Plus at $999, and the Ultra still being that whopping $1,299. There also could be a name change coming to the Galaxy S25 Ultra, and it could be called the S25 Note. Now, I would take this with a grain of salt. I don't think it's going to happen, but the rumor is there. But what's looking like it will happen, and a little bit more concrete, is that we could be seeing a Galaxy S25 Slim. This already has a model number that's floating around, and that will be known as SM2937B. But besides from that model number, we know absolutely nothing else about this yet. But the talk is that this would release a couple of months later than the rest of the Galaxy S25 series. And if they do this, Samsung, I think it would be quite exciting, because apparently we could be getting some pro-level cameras in a slimmer form factor. But that is everything that we know so far about the Galaxy S25s, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be the biggest generation update that we've ever seen here, but I am hopeful that Samsung have something up their sleeve. But if we just go off the rumors that we have at the moment, it doesn't look like there's going to be a lot changing with the S25 lineup. But Samsung is slowly starting to lag behind here when you look at what Huawei and people like Honor are doing. There'll be a load of software announcements as well, of course, that we know nothing about yet, but we'll see that at Galaxy Unpacked, and I'm sure we'll see loads of Galaxy AI features coming as well. But just going off rumors, what do you think of the S25 lineup? Is this a big enough jump for you to upgrade from the S24 Ultra? Let me know in the comments below. Before you head off as well, make sure you subscribe to the Android Authority YouTube channel, and if you do that, then I will see you later.